Thank you so much. The next speaker for today is Alem Kent. Alem Kent is a Crimean Tatar-American interdisciplinary documentary storyteller. The formats of their work has spanned from interactive performances, theater, film, podcasts, exhibits, to virtual reality. They aim to bring different cultures and audiences together to experience new stories and forms of storytelling, featuring the strengths and inspiration from Ukraine and Crimea. Alem is one of the co-founders of the Kyiv Independent, Ukraine's leading English news media organization. Alem is interested in how film can interact with people to further connect them with the life we have and the world around us. Welcome Alem to the stage.
Hello. Sorry, I'm going to read this so I make sure I'm concrete in what I want to say. This time, 3 years ago, like many Ukrainians, I woke up to the sounds of sirens early in the morning. I was with my friend Katya, a native from Slavyansk, an eastern town of Ukraine that has had an intimate relationship to the front lines for 11 years now, and my Crimean Tatar mother, Velide. We were able to get out of the city through the help of a friend, someone we didn't know, a Belarusian journalist who was in exile. In all the chaos that occurred, it was only because of collective action we were able to help each other. But that's a crazy story for another time. I had been working in Ukraine as a journalist since 2019, and like Andriy said, I'm one of the co-founders of the Kyiv Independent. I left journalism to pursue nonfiction storytelling through different mediums, whether it be through documentary performance, film, photography, art protest, any variety of ways of engaging with the currency of truth in order to reach different audiences. Like it's been said multiple times today, we're in the age of misinformation and manipulation. It is easy to shut down and shut off the news because of the incredibly depressing state of the world, and how are we to trust the information that is coming through? We need to be actively engaged in order to be informed, in order to live. We cannot be passive. And as an acknowledgement of factual truths, despite what Russia and now Trump says, let me reiterate the facts and acknowledge it out loud. It has been 11 years of war, not 3. I notice people slip up sometimes, but I make sure to actively say every single time, full-scale war versus war. It's a small, passive slip-up, but it makes all the difference. 11 years of war that was not started by Ukraine, but starting with the Russian occupation of Crimea and the invasion of the East. Within 24 hours of Ukraine's successful revolution of dignity, Russian boots were on the ground in Crimea. February 26th was the largest protest organized in Crimea by Crimean Tatars, the indigenous people of Crimea. They're a close-knit Muslim community, so therefore they were really effective in coming together and starting the large protest. February 27th, the Russian soldiers seized the administrative buildings in Simferopol, and one of the first things they did was burn the historical archives, including ancient artifacts and scrolls. March 3rd, there was the public abduction of Crimean Tatar Reshat Ametov, who was conducting a single-person protest on the street with a sign. There's a video footage of him online, I think it's even on YouTube, of the Russians taking him and forcing him into a car. His tortured and mutilated body was found 3 weeks later. March 16th, the sham referendum. My Crimean Tatar friends who were there at the time refused to leave their homes to vote, not that they could anyway, as the streets were full of tanks and armed men. 11 years, over 221 imprisoned, 137 at least are Crimean Tatars suffering inhumane conditions and treatment. Going back to an earlier point, one of the first things that occupiers do when they occupy a Ukrainian village or town is to destroy the budynek kultury, the local house of culture. Why? I mean, some of these villages that they occupy are incredibly small, and the budynek kultury might not be some massive, impressive museum. It could literally just be a small house with one single room, a few portraits, or a book. But they make sure to destroy it every single time, one of the first things they do, because they know that culture is power, and history is power, and Ukrainian identity is power. I've come to Stanford as a master's student in the documentary film program. It's a really small, intense 2-year program. And I'm currently working on my last film, my thesis film that I filmed in Ukraine this January. My close friends have been verteping to the east since 2019. Vartep is an ancient Ukrainian tradition. It was born in the 17th century. It was the time of the national liberation movement when Ukrainians began to assert themselves against Polish-Lithuanian domination and influences of Moscow. This tradition, including kolyade, song and cheer, and live moral theater, was also banned in the Soviet Union because they understood how much power culture, tradition, identity, and the act of coming together has. When this is all in place, the Russian Empire has no chance, so they seek to eradicate it at every turn. We say 11 years of war, but Ukrainians know that we've been fighting against this aggressor for centuries. After crossing the border of Ukraine because of the full-scale attack 3 years ago, my mother burst into tears, stating that the same forces that forced her grandparents out of their home during Stalin's genocide and deportation of Crimean Tatars were doing the same exact thing 80 years later to her child. The areas that I filmed at this January were safe enough for civilians to travel to at the time. We do not know if that may be the case in the future. The city of Pokrovsk, where the famous song, The Carol of the Bells, was written, had almost been fully occupied by the Russians at that time. The Ukrainians had 2 kilometers left. It was a different region where we were, but every day we would watch on the map as the occupiers crawled forward. The tradition of Vertep and its carols are taboo in occupied territories today. If people were to do so, they would disappear and be punished. Just as the composer of the Carol of the Bells, Mykola Leontovich, was over 100 years ago when he was executed by the Soviet secret police. 2 months later, his song premiered at Carnegie Hall and became the world-famous song that it is today. The filming of this ritual and songs in these territories was vital because in the worst-case scenario, this could be the last time Vertep could be freely sung in these parts of eastern Ukraine. And now at least we have this archive of it, so we can always go back and see what was. When I was talking about this project with a friend of mine, Pauline, we started to ask, what does it mean to perform when the world has collapsed? To turn war zones, bullet-ridden walls into zones of song, dance, of folklore, and wonder. I have many instances here when I look around and nothing makes sense. In Donetsk Oblast this January, everything made sense. Life had meaning. Perhaps it was because of the collective community action. From the soldiers, the babushkas, the children, the songs we sang together felt more powerful than any occupying army will ever feel. As we mark 11 years of war, we must find our ways to fight collectively together. We cannot do this alone, and we must find ways to support each other and practice staying engaged, as we are in this for the long game. When asked, how do we do it? How do we continue on? We just do. We have no choice. And we don't. Many are robbed of the chance to continue on, sacrificing their lives in order to defend and liberate occupied territories. I had this in mind the entire time we were traveling for Vertep this January, from Kharkiv to Izyum to Slavyansk to Kramatorsk. It's in Kramatorsk that this following audio snippet that's in my project takes place in. I'll end my talk with it, reflecting on how we engage with the difficulties that we live to day and actively transform it for the better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alem, for this powerful speech.